Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello, and thanks for joining us here for episode 518 with Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. Gleb is talking about why not to go with your gut and how to avoid making disastrous decisions. So I'm thankful for him, and I'm thankful for you as Thanksgiving is roughly now-ish based on the release of this episode. You might be listening it months to the future. That's cool too. So thank you. I appreciate you. Even if you went to the University of Michigan, we're really harsh on Michigan folks in this episode. And I just want to let you know, it's all in good fun. We're just razzing you and tweaking you a little bit. They're great people that I really respect and I like from the University of Michigan. And we're just joking around here a little bit. So all in good fun because we're pretty harsh. Anyway, you're going to learn 1, the biggest decision-making mistake people make. 2, 3 handy debiasing techniques. And 3, 5 questions to guide everyday decisions. So if you want to see the show notes or the transcript or the links to albums we've referenced, it's over at awesomeatyourjob.com/ep518, or just tap the expansion of this episode note or description in your podcast app player and tap that. All the faster. Here's Gleb's story. He's known as the disaster avoidance expert. Dr. Gleb Tsipursky protects leaders from disasters by developing the most effective decision-making strategies via his consulting, coaching, and training from disaster avoidance experts. A cognitive neuroscientist and behavioral economist, Dr. Tsipursky writes for Inc., Time, and CNBC. A best-selling author, his new book, available on Amazon and bookstores everywhere, is Never Go With Your Gut. Big thanks to Gleb for sharing his wisdom with us, and big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. Now, here's Gleb. Gleb, thanks so much for joining us here on the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Pete. It's a pleasure.
Well, I'd love to learn all about you have an interesting brand for your business. It's called Disaster Avoidance Experts. Tell us, first of all, what do you mean by disaster? What are we avoiding here?
Any sort of things that seriously impact your bottom line in a negative way. Now, that might mean things like having a key employee leave, or having your website crash unexpectedly, or having lacking a succession plan, as I mentioned, for, let's say, what happens if you have a disability and you can't work for a while? What happens then? That's kind of, if your key client leaves and you're really dependent on that client, that's a problem. So that's one area of disasters, things that seriously impact your bottom line in a negative way. Another area of disasters, which people think about less, but is just as impactful, is when you don't take advantage of opportunities. So let's say your competitor goes bankrupt and you have all your money devoted and resources devoted to your current business plan. That means you can't take advantage of the competitor's bankruptcy to get their employees, key employees on board with you. You can't take advantage of the competitor's bankruptcy to get their clients if all of your money and resources is devoted to something else. Or other sort of opportunities that open up, let's say the political situation. You have some tariffs going on, so people are changing their supply chains, and you have an opportunity to be the new supplier, but you're already locked into contracts that keep you with people you're currently supplying to. That's another problem. So people don't think about missing opportunities as disasters, but they can be just as disastrous as threats. So that's what I mean by disasters.
Okay. And so I'm intrigued then, what in your client experience would you estimate is the biggest disaster that you've helped somebody avoid?
The biggest disaster. Well, that's a tough one because it really depends on how you think about do you think about jobs or careers? I do a lot of coaching for executives, which includes coaching on their career. So I'll give you an example. There was this executive who was thinking about making a job switch to create an enterprise, to be a startup leader. And we talked through the situation. He was excited. He wanted to make the jump. We talked through the situation, and what was he excited about? What were his long-term plans? And what we discovered was that he was excited about the idea of a startup. He was excited about the financial potential of a startup, the impact on the world. But when I talked to him about, hey, do you know what it's like to work in a startup? Have you ever worked in that environment? Turned out that he wasn't really prepared for the chaos and stress that is involved in a startup, and especially the failures. when you start up a business, as any entrepreneur knows, you have a ton of failures. Not the whole business itself, but when you're trying to figure things out. How are your systems going to work? How are your processes going to work? Who are going to be your clients? He really wasn't prepared for that. He was very much a perfectionist, and he took failure poorly. So he really wasn't prepared for the chaotic entrepreneurial nature of a startup, and especially the failure of it. So he decided not to go for it. He stayed in corporate America and spent the rest of his career there. He was quite happy, and he would have been very stressed out if he went for a startup. So that's one example with a personal career move. Now, another situation would be with a company. There was a company that I was consulting with, which was a mid-sized manufacturing company here in the Midwest, about 2,000 people, and they were going to buy another company of about 1,500 people, another mid-sized manufacturing, this time in the Southwest. And so what happened was that they really were excited about buying it. They looked at the company, they looked at the company's financials looked good. They looked at the company's products look good. They would fulfill a gap that the buying company currently had. But what they didn't think about is that they didn't really think about the internal systems and processes of this company, the company culture. Now, I worked with a company that was my client for a while to get their internal culture more team-oriented and more flat, less hierarchical. But the company that they were going to buy was much more hierarchical, and its culture was much more hierarchical, top-down, and its internal systems and processes were much more hierarchical and top-down. So honestly, they would have really clashed in a really bad and harmful way. And I've seen companies do if you think about mergers and acquisitions, you look at the research on this topic, about 80% of mergers and acquisitions fail. So this would have definitely been one of those 80% that failed. And I'm very thankful that my client decided to avoid that merger and stepped away from it. So those are two disasters that I help leaders and businesses avoid.
Okay. Well, and so I'd love to hear then, in terms of humans and decision-making, what have been some of the most striking discoveries you've made about how we go about decision-making and often poorly?
I think the most important thing that I've discovered, and I've been doing this, just to be clear, for over 20 years. In consulting, coaching, training on decision-making, I've been doing this for a while. I've also went into higher academia. I researched this topic. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist and behavioral economist, and so I've researched this at the research level, doing peer-reviewed research. What I found was that really surprising and very bothersome was that people very much tend to go with their gut, with their intuitions. What they feel is what they do. So they equate the feeling of rightness and correctness and intuitiveness, that this is the right thing to do. I feel it in my gut. They equate that with truth and rightness and what's best for their bottom line and what's best for their long-term goals. And that's terrible. Our gut is evolved for the savanna environment. It's evolved for small tribes of 15 people to 150 people, and this saber-toothed tiger response when we need to flee from a saber-toothed tiger. That's what our gut is adapted for. We are the descendants of those who jumped at 100 shadows and successfully avoided that one saber-toothed tiger. In our current environment, that's really bad to jump at 100 shadows. We get so much stress, so much problems. There are so many people who are anxious and depressed because of these excessive reactions from our gut. But people still trust their gut. They trust their feelings. They trust their intuitions. And they make really bad mistakes as a result of it. The most fundamental thing I convey to my clients that has helped them so much is to distance themselves from this feeling of rightness, from this feeling of comfort. When you have comfort, when you're comfortable about a decision, that's the time to most suspect your decision, because you're often going to make the most wrong decision when you feel most comfortable with it. It's counterintuitive, but that's the civilized thing to be. Just like it's counterintuitive to eat with our fork and knife. We had to learn how to eat with forks and knives. Now it would be very weird if you don't eat, fish and steak with your fork and knife. But that's something you had to learn to do. But we still make the decisions as though we eat with our hands.
Intriguing, so much there. So I think that makes a lot of sense, is to note there's a wide distinction between the feeling of rightness and truth. And often when you're the most comfortable, that is not an indicator that it's right. I guess especially in the sense of when you're trying to do something new and different and challenging, or that just sort of stretches you in some way, that will naturally be uncomfortable. So I guess I'm wondering then. So are you saying then that intuition has no place, or how would you contextualize and position intuition in the scheme of decision making?
So tuition is a complex concept, and we have to separate two things here. We have to separate gut reactions, which have to do with our evolved tribal intuitions, and that's kind of coming from our instinct, from our savage primitive environment. That's when we were babies and we responded to things. That's intuition, that's inborn, that's genetic, and that's really, really harmful in the modern world. In the modern business environment, you don't want to use that genetic inborn intuition, that tribal response where you look at a person, and if the person seems like that person is like you will like that person much more. That's the halo effect, where we tend to like other people who look like us, who think like us, who feel like us, who have this, our color, skin color, and so on, who have our politics, our value sets. That's very dangerous. And of course, we don't like people who don't have that. That's called the horns effect. Now, in the current business environment, it's very bad to use this tribal sensibility to make decisions, because then you'll hire other people. Let's say you're a business leader, you'll hire other people who are like you, and then you'll be making very bad decisions because you'll be all thinking alike and you won't question each other's decisions. Same thing if you're a solopreneur. You'll be collaborating with other people who are like you, and you will not be getting the huge benefit of collaborating with different people. So that's kind of one area where you want to very much be aware of these inborn intuitions. Now, where intuitions are helpful, here's the area where they're helpful. They're helpful where you have learned over time to make good, quick, effective decisions. For example, right now, pretty much any professional has learned how to look for their email and quickly separate the spam from the quality email. You don't need to think about that for a long time. You just say, okay, this looks like spam. Leaders, people who are in leadership positions, have learned how to organize of judgment and decision-making delegation effectively. How do you delegate effectively to other people? You can do that effectively now, but that's a learned habit. Now, people who have been working effectively for a long time have learned good productivity and organization systems. They're really productive. They know how to do that. But again, they had to learn these things. So now they feel intuitive, just like eating with your fork and knife feels intuitive. But what they are is healthy learned mental habits. It's kind of like driving a car. You had to learn how to drive a car. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of effort. I remember learning how to drive a car myself. I failed my first driving test. I couldn't pass it the first time. Now I can drive a car very easily, and it feels like I'm driving an autopilot. It feels like I'm using my intuition, but I'm actually using is healthy learned mental habits. So you want to differentiate those savage primitive instincts from those healthy learned civilized mental habits, that natural state from the civilized state. And so the intuition is useful when you've been doing the same thing in a specific domain for a long time and you've been correct at it. What you don't want to do is apply it to new domains. So for example, many small business owners trust their ability to hire people based on interviews. They have someone come in, they talk to this person, they hire this person or not. Extensive research has shown that that's a terrible decision. That's really bad strategy for hiring people because they don't have enough experience in hiring people. They don't really know how to do it effectively. And some people might be offended by when I say that, but hey, I'm just telling you what the research shows. Another area is when you sell your business. When people selling their business make many, many, many mistakes because they haven't done this before and they haven't done this often. Same thing in mergers and acquisitions. They haven't done this often, so they don't know what to watch out for. So any new area, anything you haven't done before, anything important and significant, anything emotionally salient, anything that really pulls at your emotions, you want to be especially aware of and not use your intuitions.
Well, I guess I'm curious in particular about intuition when it comes to, let's say, the matter of trusting another person. Like, it seems like they have a proposal for you. Hey, maybe it's a business related thing in terms of, hey, there's this new vendor. They can provide, this thing at this price, and they seem to have all of the right answers and check the right boxes based on your criteria. But there's just something inside you that says, you know what? I kind of just don't trust this guy. I think he's gonna not deliver the goods. Is that a particular type of intuition? And what's your take on that one?
Yeah, that's bad. That's if you don't know this person for a long time, it's likely that it's your tribal intuitions. If this guy is a slick salesman and he's able to sell you, it's because it's a famous salesperson technique to make it look like and appear like he is similar to you. They try to mimic you. They try to use your wording. So this person is most likely just not a very good salesperson and doesn't fit your idea of what it looks like your tribal member should be. So you don't want to trust your instincts around new people. This is going to offend a lot of people. It already has. The research has offended a lot of people, and it's okay. I'm just telling you what the research says. You shouldn't trust your instincts around new people. You need to look at that person and say, hey, is this person in any way significantly different from me? Different in race, ability, gender, sexuality, politics, the way this person speaks, this person's background. I'll give you an interesting example. So I was doing a presentation for over 100 HR professionals at a diversity inclusion conference here in Columbus, Ohio. And Columbus, Ohio is, of course, famous as the home of the Ohio State Buckeyes, our football team. Go Bucks. And it's very, very popular around here. So our big rival is the University of Michigan up north. And the Wolverines, not very popular around here.
Yeah, those Michigan people. I went to the University of Illinois. It's fun to hate people who went to Michigan. No offense, Michigan listeners.
There you go. Well, let's hate Michigan. I agree.
Not everybody, but some of them are really obnoxious, and so you got to stick it to them. Please continue.
I know. I'm joking. But anyway, what I asked these HR professionals who are leaders in diversity inclusion here in Columbus, Ohio was, hey, would you hire somebody who is a University of Michigan fan? So out of those 100 people, only 3 people indicated that they would hire a University of Michigan fan. And these are experts in diversity inclusion. They would not hire a Michigan fan. Just because that person is a Michigan fan, that would exclude that person from hiring. So that shows you the importance of tribalism in something so, everyone likes to hate on Michigan fans, but honestly, it's kind of a trivial thing, which team you root for, right? It's just about it doesn't really matter for your work performance, meaning from...
Well, and in that context, I wonder if they were sort of afraid to, raise their hand because people would look at them and go, ugh.
No. I mean, and that's indicative. That's why they wouldn't hire this person, right? Because they know that other people would be like, why the heck did you hire this University of Michigan fan at their job?
I would hire them and tell them not to let people know that they're a Michigan fan.
It's not a viable scenario. It's not a scenario which we should have, but that's the way our brains work. So just because someone is from the University of Michigan. So we should not trust our intuitions about new people. So that's the critical important thing. What you want to do if this is a new person, you want to bring in someone quite different from yourself. If you are kind of serious about using this person as a new vendor, and use this external trusted advisor to evaluate this person and see what they say. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense in terms of and then the intuition still is serving a function. It has given you some bit of information, which may be confirmed or denied, that probes you to go a little further, in your investigation. Versus if it weren't there, you might be like, all right, we're good to go. No need.
And that's something to be afraid of also, because if this person is a slick salesperson and sells you a bill of goods, if you feel very comfortable with this person, you want to step back and see if this person is using typical salesman techniques like copying you, mimicking you, echoing you. These are techniques that you can learn about and protect yourself from. But if you don't know it, if you just go with what's comfortable for you and you don't protect yourself from this comfort feeling techniques, then you will be sold a bill of goods.
Right. Okay. Well, so that's handy. Well, then let's talk now about cognitive bias. First, could you define that for listeners who are not familiar with the term? And then, list out just a couple of what you've observed to be the most pervasive and disastrous cognitive biases in the workplace.
So cognitive biases are mistakes that we make because of how our brain is wired. A lot of it is due to our evolutionary heritage, like I mentioned before, tribalism, the fight or flight response. Other aspects are due to just our information processing is imperfect. Just the way we process information, our brain is far from perfect. And that is why we have systematic errors that cause us to deviate away from the perfect decision making. So the perfect decisions are decisions that most benefit in the workplace. So just in the workplace, most benefit your bottom line. In other life spheres, it's going to be decisions that most benefit your life goals or your professional goals or whatever goals you have. So that's the perfect decisions, the ones that can give you the most benefit. Cognitive biases are systematic errors that cause us to deviate away from these perfect decisions. I gave you an example before already of the halo effect and the horns effect. Another common cognitive bias that a lot of people get struck by very problematically is called the planning fallacy. The planning fallacy is an interesting one. It's where we tend to assume that everything will go according to plan. We invest all our resources. I mentioned before, what are disasters? Disasters are when we don't anticipate risks and when we don't anticipate opportunities. So we invest all our resources into our plan, and when problems happen or opportunities happen, we don't have enough resources to take care of them, and we don't look for these opportunities or threats in advance, and we aren't able to address them because of that. So that's the planning fallacy. And you'll often hear the phrase, failing to plan is planning to fail. Again, failing to plan is planning to fail. This is a common phrase. It's very common, just like go with your gut is a common phrase. They're both wrong. They're both problems. You don't want to go with your gut, and you don't want to think that failing to plan is planning to fail, because our plans, we tend to make perfect plans. So what you want to think about is never go with your gut. And for the other one, you want to think failing to plan for problems is planning to fail. Again, failing to plan for problems is planning to fail. What you want to do is plan for what kind of problems might come up and address these problems in advance. And the same thing for opportunities. What kind of opportunities might come up and address these opportunities in advance, as well as reserve some resources for unexpected threats and unexpected opportunities. So that's the planning fallacy. That's one. Another one that a lot of business leaders run into is overconfidence bias. Overconfidence bias is our tendency to be way too confident about our decisions. And honestly, the higher up a leader is, the more experienced somebody is, the more they tend to be confident, and the more biased they tend to be, the more excessively confident they tend to be. Not everyone, but this is the general tendency. So, for example, we found research that if somebody says, I'm 100% confident about this, yes, I'll bet the company on this, I'll bet my career on this, they're only going to be right about 80% of the time. 80% of the time.
Oh, interesting. Those who say, when I'm 100% sure about this, are right 80% of the time.
That's correct. And that's horrible because they lose the company and they lose their careers. So 20% of the time. So this is very dangerous for people who say they're 100% confident. Definitely this thing, because of the way our brain works. So we have to be very careful to develop a sense of humility. And this is really important. Humility is such an underappreciated business asset, business emotion. We need to be able to have this sense of humility, have this sense of, oh, hey, I might be wrong and it's okay. Let me step back and let me evaluate the situation. Let me be less confident than I intuitively am. Let me ask others for strategies. And my book talks, Never Go With Your Gut, goes for a whole bunch of strategies that you can use to evaluate the situation, address threats, seize opportunities. So you want to be more humble. And that is one of the critical emotion that you want to develop in order to get yourself to use these strategies effectively.
And so you've got a number of a dozen debiasing techniques. Could you share, what's perhaps the most one or two powerful or efficient means of really helping remove some bias and improving the decision-making of every professional?
Well, I'll share a very quick one and then some more complex ones. The quickest one is counting to 10. Your mom probably told you, count to 10 before you do something emotional, especially when you're angry. And that actually works. With the recent research has shown that counting to 10, delaying your decision-making, works quite effectively for day-to-day decisions. So that's one really good and useful strategy that you can effectively deploy. Counting to 10, taking the time to think about it at least for 10 seconds before day-to-day decisions. So that's one. Another one that many people don't use but is incredibly helpful is making predictions about the future. Again, making predictions about the future. Let's say you are in a meeting of the C-suite and people are saying, hey, this product will go great, or this product will not be good at all that you're about to launch. Have everyone make a prediction. Have everyone make, hey, here's how I think it will do in the next 6 months. And make sure that you check back on what happened 6 months ago. That way you'll calibrate. How well do you think your business, if you're solopreneur, is going to do, or if you're the business leader, how well do you think it's going to do? How well do specific aspects of your business, how well are they going to do? How well is a specific client going to be with you? How much will they order? Thinking about these things, make predictions about the future, and then check yourself. And you will slowly improve your ability to make good decisions because you'll calibrate yourself over time. So that's another one that I wanted to mention. And another one that I think is incredibly important is to get an outside view, have an external perspective, step back from your current context. So people tend to be greatly overconfident. Business leaders especially tend to be very optimistic. I mean, I'm an optimist myself. I tend to be too optimistic. I think the grass is greener on the other side of the hill. Things are less risky than they seem. However, what's really helpful for that optimism and overconfidence is stepping back and say, hey, if somebody else was launching a product just like that, how do you think it would work out? What is the typical situation for mergers and acquisitions? So typical situation for mergers and acquisitions is that 80% fail. So if you're going to merger and acquisition, you shouldn't think that you're better than all the other business leaders who have gone into mergers and acquisitions. You should assume that the most likely situation, 4 out of 5 times you'll fail. So you have to really work hard to make sure that your specific merger or acquisition is going to be so extremely good that it overcomes this very, very high typical rate of very smart people. I mean, business leaders who do mergers and acquisitions are pretty smart people. And you have to make sure that it will not fail and it overcomes a pretty high barrier. So those are 3 things that I would share with people.
All right. And so you also spend a fair bit of time discussing our human tendency to try to minimize loss. And so what's going on there, and what should we do about that?
Yes, so we as human beings tend to minimize loss, and that is a big problem because we don't look sufficiently at gains. And this is a tendency called loss aversion. So, for example, when somebody, let's say, has invested their money, and the loss aversion, tendency to minimize losses, there are a couple of cognitive biases around that. So, for example, when somebody has invested money into some project, let's say, I was working with a client who invested $2.5 million into a manufacturing project, and the client was really reluctant to look at the situation and see that the external environment actually changed because of the recent tariffs, and there was not nearly as much demand for the product anymore, and so because of the changing of supply chains. And I was talking to this client, I was pointing out the situation, and he was really reluctant to let go of his vision of the future. So he didn't want to lose this. He didn't want to, lose his vision of the future. So because he invested a lot of emotions of it, he felt a lot of positive emotions of it. And he didn't want to perceive himself as someone who made a mistake, as someone who's a loser. So business leader, that's one of the worst emotions for business leaders. When I do trainings for business leaders and give these examples, what are you most afraid of? Failure is probably the biggest, most common thing I hear about. So people don't want to be fail. They don't want to be perceived as losers. So they are trying to do a lot of things to avoid these losses, and they throw a lot of good money after bad. So he kept going quite a bit longer with that project than he should have. Eventually, he got out of it, fortunately, but that was a pretty bad investment. He didn't really, at the time he made it, it wasn't really terrible, but he put quite a bit more money into it than he should have. And that's a tendency that's called sunken costs, where we tend to sink too much money, too much resources into after previous resources we have made, because we don't want to feel like losers and we don't want to lose these initial resources. What's much more effective, the strategy to address this loss aversion, sunken costs, is to say, hey, okay, these resources, they're lost, let them go. Just from the situation where you are right now, what is the best decision to make for your long-term goals? Whatever your long-term goals are in this professional activities, let's say, for your bottom line. The same thing applies to personal life. I mean, in relationships, so many people sink a lot of their time, resources into relationships that really aren't going to work out, that they should have cut off a long time ago. So that's a common thing that happens in relationships, unfortunately. So you want to be thinking about, hey, ignoring the previous investments. What's the situation now? Because your previous investments, you might feel bad about them, but it doesn't really matter from that perspective. You want to think about your current position. And from your current position, what kind of steps do you want to take to maximize your long-term future returns in all life areas? And so that's a strategy that you can use to address loss aversion.
All right. Well, Gleb, tell me, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things?
One of the things I want to mention, make sure is that there's a technique that people can use to very effectively and quickly address the decision-making problems that we all tend to have. And these are 5 questions that you can use to avoid decision disasters. So here are the 5 questions that you should use for everyday decision-making, and you can even use them for major decision-making when you don't have time to do a more thorough technique. First, what important information did I not yet fully consider? You want to especially look for information that goes against your comfort levels, that goes against your intuitions, because this will tend to hide the kind of problematic aspects of your decision. So you look at information that goes against your intuitions especially. Second, what dangerous judgment errors, cognitive biases, did I not yet address? In my book, Never Go With Your Gut, goes over the 30 most dangerous ones. Third, and I mentioned this before in the program, what would a trusted and objective advisor suggest I do? So imagine little Pete on your shoulder and think about, what would Pete suggest that you do? Or somebody else that you trust who's an objective advisor to you. Now, those are the first 3 questions have to do with making a decision. We're transitioning into the last 2 questions about preventing failure and optimizing success in implementing the decision. First, how have I addressed all the ways this decision can fail? Again, how have I addressed all the ways this decision can fail? Think about all the potential problems, realistic problems you can anticipate, and address them in advance. And the same thing for opportunities. Finally, what new information would cause me to revisit this decision? Again, what new information would cause me to revisit this decision? You really should make this information, identify this in advance of implementing the decision, because in the heat of the decision-making implementation, you will tend to run into situations where you want to, maybe I should change my mind, maybe I should revisit the decision. It's much more effective if you already decided what would cause you to revisit the decision, rethink things in advance.
What I also love about that question is what new information would cause me to revisit this decision is it can reveal if you're a sort of, I guess, one-track mind, obsessed. Like if the answer is nothing, this is what we must do. And it's like, well, that's probably a red flag that there should be something that could possibly cause you to revisit it. Mm-hmm. And if nothing comes to mind, we are probably not done thinking about it yet.
Yep. And you're not thinking about it straight is the problem. That any decision, pretty much any decision, can be and should be revisited if you have specific information. And if you can't falsify this decision, if you can't falsify this choice, if you can't say, hey, this would make me change my mind, then you're probably way too overcommitted to this decision.
All right. Well, now can you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Sure. I really like Ben Franklin's quote that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's a very insightful quote, and it's something that I live by, and I encourage everyone around me to live by, because we tend to spend way too much time dealing with disasters as opposed to preventing them in advance.
All right. And how about a favorite study or experiment or piece of research?
I really like a study where this was a good study. So there were, I don't remember which university it was in. Let's say it was Ohio State, where a bunch of students were given a math test as an experiment. They were paid for the math test, and they were paid for how many questions they would get right on the math test. And they were given the opportunity to score themselves. So everyone who was in Ohio State was given the math test, and then there was one student who was obviously cheating. Very obviously, very clearly cheating. And this student, in one set of experiments, was wearing an Ohio State uniform. So just kind of part of the tribe. And at that set of experiments, many other students cheated. A whole bunch of other students cheated. Now, in another set of experiments, that student was wearing a University of Michigan uniform.
Yeah, those cheaters from Michigan. That sounds about right.
Yeah, exactly. And pretty much nobody else was cheating at that experiment.
So no one else ended up cheating. They were
nobody
not
else.
influenced by the outsider.
Influenced by tribalism. They felt the first experiment where this person wore an Ohio State uniform, it's like, oh, my tribe is cheating, therefore this is a good thing, therefore this is appropriate. The second set of experiments is, the enemy is cheating. No, we will not cheat. We will do the true, honest, ethical thing. So it shows us how much we're influenced by tribalism. And so much of this is very, very applicable to culture within organizations. So whenever you see people within an organization cheating, it's because this culture induces cheating. Whereas if you see people within an organization being honest, it's all about the culture causing honesty. We're very much influenced by our culture, the people around us, much more than we tend to believe we are.
And how about a favorite book?
Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. This is the seminal book on cognitive biases. I really like it. It's part of that older generation of scholars. So Daniel Kahneman is part of the first generation of scholars who looked at cognitive biases. I really like his work, and I think it's incredibly important as a foundational base for all future work that was done on this topic.
And do you recommend a favorite tool, something that helps you be awesome at your job?
Well, what I have found is that I really like flexible tools the flexibility of Trello as an organizational tool, and I'm not being paid by Trello, they're not an affiliate of Trello in any way, but Trello is a system of essentially a Kanban board where you use a combination of index cards that you move around from different columns. So I use it all the time for my organization and for various projects that I do because it's very flexible and it's kind of pretty intuitive for me to use. It's kind of like index cards. So that's my favorite tool.
And how about a favorite habit, something that you do that helps you be more awesome at your job?
My favorite habit that's really important is, as part of my routine, I always do journaling in the morning about what I learned from the last day and what I'm grateful for, and a couple of other things. But that's the essence of the journaling, kind of what I'm learned and what I'm grateful for. So the first one of what I learned helps me keep a constant habit of self-improvement throughout my life. The gratitude, what I'm grateful for, helps improve my mood. And we tend to greatly underestimate the importance of mood, because mood, so the research on this topic shows that we are about 80 to 90% driven by our emotions. About, again, 80 to 90% driven by our emotions to do what we do, to make the decisions that we make. So I make sure to take care of my emotions. And that's one of the ways I take care of my emotions, by having a gratitude diary.
And tell me, is there a particular nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back to you often?
What I tell you, and something I mentioned in the presentation in the podcast earlier, is that you want to avoid equating the feeling of comfort with trueness. So avoid. Comfort is not true. So whatever you feel is comfortable and intuitive is often going to be the worst thing for you to do. So you want to very much question that feeling of comfort and intuitiveness, even if it feels right, even though it feels right. That's exactly the time when you need to most question it in order to make the best decisions going forward.
And if folks want to learn more, get in touch, where would you point them?
Well, they can check out my book, Never Go With Your Gut. They can check out my website, disasteravoidanceexperts.com. Again, disasteravoidanceexperts.com for blog, videos, podcasts, and so on. And they can check me out on LinkedIn. Connect with me there, please. That's Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. So Gleb, Gleb, Tsipursky on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions about anything you heard today, I welcome you to contact me by email at gleb, Gleb, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com. At disasteravoidanceexperts.com.
All right. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks seeking to be awesome at their jobs?
I want you to remember to beware of going with your gut. Going with your gut is a very common piece of advice. It's probably one of the most common pieces of advice, and I want to challenge you to question this piece of advice. It's very dangerous to just go with your gut. It causes you to run into a serious career disasters, serious business disasters, and you don't want that to happen to you, like happens to so many people. Don't trust your gut. That's one thing. And the other part of this that I've also talked about is planning. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Don't trust that. Our plans tend to not survive contact with the enemy, and you want to make sure to think that failing to plan for problems is planning to fail. So those are the challenges that I want to give folks.
All right. Well, Gleb, it's been lots of fun. I wish you much luck and fun in all of your upcoming decisions.
Thank you so much, Pete. And I wish you the same. And thank you so much for helping people be awesome at their jobs.
I appreciated much of what Gleb said, particularly that notion that comfort is not the same thing as truth. These are different phenomena. And particularly when you're looking to challenge yourself or make a decision that might involve a bit of a stretch, you're not going to feel that comfort. You will, in fact, be leaving your comfort zone, as they say in the biz. So good stuff from Gleb. Again, the show notes, the transcript, the links to items we've referenced are at awesomeatyourjob.com/ep518. One more time, apologies to the Michigan alum. It's all in good fun. I dig you, and it's all good. And a happy Thanksgiving to the U.S. listeners. I hope you have a very lovely holiday with friends and family and just meaningful, delicious, fun times. There will be no episode on Friday, as we'll kind of call that a bit of a holiday since folks are often off then. On Monday, we'll be back with Buster Benson, the first guest who has a poster hanging in my office. It's about cognitive biases, go figure. And he is talking about why are we arguing, how to disagree well. Historically, I have had a little Black Friday, Pete's favorite things to buy. If you're interested in that, you can check out some of those historically, but I'd encourage you to check out our sponsors as well if you're looking for gift ideas as the holiday shopping season commences on the Black Friday. And here's a fun fact for you as well. When you click a link to a book on the website awesomeatyourjob.com, many of them go to amazon.com, and I participate in Amazon Associates, which gives us a tiny little commission associated with the purchases you make. And it gives me little reports. So I can tell you that awesomeatyourjob.com listeners, amongst the most popular items to purchase thus far this year are Data Story, Explain Data and Inspire Action. That's the book we had from guest Nancy Duarte. And then the Getting Things Done workbook, which is from David Allen. So fun fact, those are two of the most popular things that folks have chosen to click from awesomeatyourjob.com to then buy on Amazon. That's it. Looking forward to catching you next time. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. Peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend two key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full-text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
Calling all coffee drinkers. If you've been trying to enhance your daily coffee routine, then Quest has got your back with their brand new iced coffees. Now available in 2 delightfully delicious flavors that'll be sure to add an extra pep in your step: vanilla latte and mocha latte. Quest has been on a mission to help fuel you with protein-forward foods you'll love. Each bottle of Quest iced coffee is packed with 200 milligrams of caffeine, the same amount as 2 cups of regular coffee, plus 10 grams of protein per serving to help you supercharge your day. And did I mention that they only contain 1 gram of sugar? It might just be time to cheat on your iced coffee with iced coffee. Find Quest iced coffees on amazon.com/questnutrition. That's amazon.com/questnutrition.